Hello and welcome to Legal Thinking with myself, Ed Wootton, and my co-host, Liam Pate.
Hello!
This week, we're talking about the divorce journey. We seem to have been talking about divorce a lot recently, so nothing personal going on. But we've got a couple of guests on with our expert in divorce and separation, Jayne Martins. And she is joined by Naomi Keith, who is an associate partner and financial planner at Aspire, and also Claire Black, who's a divorce coach. And we had a really in-depth conversation just about the journey and what it's like for people going through divorce and how people can help. Best role take.
Okay, so thanks for joining us, everyone. Today we're talking about the divorce journey, as you guys know. I'm just going to kick off with a bit of a hypothetical situation, which I'm sure will be familiar to all of you. Imagine someone comes to you seeking a divorce. They're a high earner, they have a few kids. The divorce isn't acrimonious, but as I imagine is the case sometimes, it probably has the possibility to become so. What would your first set of questions or actions be? This is open questions, so whoever wants to dive in first.
Okay, so from a matrimonial solicitor's point of view, I would be relieved that it wasn't acrimonious and focused on trying to not let it get so. So I think my questions would be to find out what their kind of short-term, medium-term and long-term goals were and what they were trying to achieve. I'd be asking them questions related to the children and the arrangements for the children, and if they felt able to discuss that between themselves or if they felt they needed some additional support. I would be asking them sort of where they were emotionally along the journey to find out if they then needed some additional support to deal with that kind of side of things rather than the legal side of things, and try to identify signposting of those issues early. And then I'd be just asking the basic questions of what their assets were and working towards getting a picture for them so that we could then put a plan in place as to how to move it forward. But I think I'd need to focus initially on whether they actually thought their marriage had broken down and identify that first.
Okay, and I guess we'll go Naomi next. Let's go with that.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I mean, for me, I would usually speak to someone at this stage, and for me, it's all about getting the control back. And invariably, whenever I meet somebody initially, most people are quite terrified of the financial side of any part of their lives, particularly if they've never dealt with it before. So for me, it's just a bit of a making them feel that you've got someone that they can trust, somebody that they can lean to if they need to ask what they always say is stupid questions. But for me, it's just getting your knowledge up to date and ask questions that you do think possibly could be stupid, but you need to understand what you've got financially from an asset point of view and where you're trying to get to. So for me, it's about creating a plan the short term is to get through the legal side of the divorce, but also what do you actually want to happen and what do you want your life to look like? Forget what's going on now. And although obviously divorces start by not being acrimonious, invariably again they don't always go through very plain sailing. So I would just suggest making sure that every single thing that you've got between you, do you understand what it is? Do you know what you spend every day? Most people know what they get paid. Mm-hmm. Not many people understand what actually comes out of the bank account and on what, and what's going to continue post-divorce. So I think all it is just to get yourself up to speed and get organised and get yourself with the knowledge and the control so that then you're in a good position to understand what's being offered to you.
Sure. Okay, and Claire?
So I would be asking lots of questions about some of the background, how this person has got to where they are. And I'd be asking some questions which are fairly similar, I suppose, to Jayne's question. So I would be looking at where do you want to get to in, say, 6 months or a year? What would you like your life to look like? And also, what would you like your relationship with your ex-partner to look like? And also your parenting relationship, where do you want that to go? Because I think it's really important that you have a vision of where you're trying to get to, both with your relationship with your ex and also in your relationship as a parent with your ex, and whether that is joined up or whether that's not joined up. But it's really important to keep that right at the front of your mind throughout. I'd also be asking questions around what could potentially throw the amicability of this off course. So are there any patterns in the relationship that are likely perhaps to cause problems as you go through this? I'd also look at introducing this person to the concept of the kind of healing curve, of the kind of stages that they might expect to go through in the process of going through a divorce. So the sort of shock potentially, bargaining, anger, sadness, and then acceptance eventually. And I'd like them to understand that this is probably going to be a roller coaster, whether it's something that you want or not. It's, there will be ups and downs, and I'd be looking at introducing them to that kind of concept, and also the concept that their ex is probably not at the same point on that journey to them, and that compassion is going to be really important, especially if you want to keep it friendly.
Okay, and I guess sticking with you, Claire, as a divorce coach, how do you see your role sitting amongst probably, what could be described as the more kind of rigid legal or financial processes of a divorce?
So the way I see this is it's often the emotional aspects of going through a separation that can really derail the other aspects of it. So anger, resentment, fear as well, overwhelm, all of those things can really derail the legal process. And so when somebody works with a coach like me, I can provide them with the tools to be able to handle those emotional aspects, keep control of what they can. Because one of the things about going through a divorce is there's lots of uncertainty. You may feel as though there are lots of things that are out of control and very overwhelming. So I will help people to be in control of their emotions, be able to communicate effectively. And that then helps the legal practitioners that I'm working with, because somebody who is going through a divorce and is all over the place and who doesn't have their emotions under control, is very difficult to lead them through that legal process and to get very clear instructions from them. Okay. So somebody who's working with a coach is able to see more choices, is able to see different perspectives, and is more able to make informed decisions. And that then keeps their costs down. So I kind of see the legal, the financial, and the emotional as kind of three legs on a stool. And you take one of the legs away and it potentially can fall over. So we work very well together.
Okay. And moving on to the financial side of things, Naomi and Jayne, what concerns do people usually have around finances in divorce?
So from my point of view, from the legal point of view, their main concern is just the unknown. So firstly, it's just identifying what the finances actually are and what they're doing for the family. Often we'll deal with at least one person in a divorce that doesn't have all of the information and doesn't have all the access to the financial information that maybe the other person does. So it's about getting all of the information first and helping them understand what that means and how that can help them. And often then you need to focus on finding out how you can separate all those assets so that they can live independently in the future. And there's a lot of unknowns when you're dealing with finances. People generally don't have an in-depth knowledge of pensions, and nor should they, and various investments. That's why it's great to involve somebody like Naomi, who can really assist me when I'm advising clients as to how the finances work and what they mean and what they can look like in the future.
Yeah, I think for me, exactly that. People come to me and it's very difficult for them to understand their new life, if you like, because all they understand is property, the house that they live in, the lifestyle that they're living in, the income that the husband or wife is bringing in, or whoever the other party is, and what's going to be lost off the back of that. And I think what I try and do is sort of draw a line in the sand. And as Claire said, what do you want your life to look like? What, in your view, ideal world? Let's start there. What does good look like, and what does a brilliant post-divorce look like? And then it's just showing these people that when you break everything down, you can then start saying, well, actually, you think that you're not going to have enough money. You think that this asset isn't going to do you what it needs to do for you. But actually, what you've told me, based on how much you need to spend, you're going to be okay. So it's trying to get them to remove the sort of concept of their current life and create a new life with the new assets, and showing them in most circumstances it will be okay. And it's just going to look different. It's not going to feel awful. It's just going to be different. And hopefully, in an ideal situation, you can match what they actually want their lives to feel and look like with the assets available. Sometimes, obviously, that's not possible, but there's always a way to make it work and just make them feel a bit more comfortable. And again, the word is in control of their situation, so that they're not scared really, and they can make clear decisions.
Yeah, and I guess,
fact. Yeah.
And I guess a time like now, where there's obviously a cost of living crisis, like inflation rising massively, interest rates, everything like that, is it more difficult to calculate an appropriate financial kind of settlement?
Well, so everything that we do, so the reason I like to see clients early, we don't really sit and negotiate the financial settlement, and it is what it is, whatever. And what I like to do with family lawyers is, once a settlement or an initial settlement has been made, we can then sort of map that on a cash flow model to show the individual, okay, well, this is what you've been offered. And it happens in two ways. So sometimes it gets offered and they don't realise, actually, that offer's brilliant, you're going to be okay. I know that doesn't feel like what you thought was fair, but actually it's going to tick all the boxes that you've just told me that you want your life to look like. Now, with inflation, of course, it's high at the moment, but we try and stay calm where possible with all of our modelling, and we look at assumptions based on data going back 20, 30 years, and we always assume currently inflation's at 3%. Now, I know inflation's higher now, but that's not going to be forever, and what we're trying to do is show in a normal world what your money's going to look like in a certain time. And obviously we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we put the assumptions in place so that at least we've got something to start with. And conversely, if we have a settlement that looks absolutely awful, which obviously also happens, it's just making people wake up and say, you can't accept this, it's not enough. And there's more money on the table to have, so don't feel like you can't ask for a bit more, because if you don't, you will not meet your expenditure. But yeah, the inflation's a tricky one at the moment, but I think there's a lot of noise about inflation, and I think it's just looking at the very long-term plan, because essentially that's what it is. It's making a decision today that's going to affect your life for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So it's just looking at that long-term cash flow and trying to match it as best we can.
Absolutely. And going off what you said about people offering amounts of money that just are not acceptable, what happens when, for example, people do try to actually hide their financial kind of proceeds they might have when they're going through a divorce? I'll probably put this one to Jayne first.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times this comes up is fairly regular, but the amount of times when somebody is actually genuinely trying to hide assets is very low. Over my kind of 17-year career, I don't think I've known anyone really truly hide assets. So I just want to put that out there, that it's lots of people think that it happens and people make noises about doing it, but the reality is it's quite difficult to hide it. So we when we're dealing with financial disclosure, the courts ask for a year's worth of kind of bank statements and 2 years of tax returns and various things like that. And then we have the opportunity of forensically looking through all of that. So we do try and look if there's any kind of anomalies, if there's large parts of cash missing or been withdrawn, and we'll try and track that down and trace it as far as we're able to. And if we need to go back further, then we can ask questions about that and go back further. I mean, it's limited as to how far as lawyers we can go doing that, but we have financial advisors who can forensically look at accounts and certainly companies' accounts to work out if there is anything strange going on. And that's where the kind of legal and financial world really works well together, because if we have a suspicion that something's doing that, our abilities as lawyers to see further than that is limited. But then a financial advisor like Naomi or other financial advisors would be able to look at a more forensic approach of the accounts and how they've been treated to see if that is genuinely the case.
Yeah, I think the short answer for me, I completely agree with you, Jayne. It comes up I don't think I've ever dealt with anybody that thinks there's money hidden that has not been disclosed.
Yeah.
And fact of the matter is, unless you've got a lot of money to prove that there is money hidden, you ain't going to find it. So I think for me, it's going back to that point. Let's just try to, and this is probably where Claire and I overlap slightly, it's let's just forget about the emotional side of there's money to be there and he's hiding it or she's hiding it and I know there's more to it. Let's just go back to what do you want your life to look like post-divorce, and is there enough without worrying about whether there is or there isn't money being hidden to service your life going forward and make you happy so that you can move on and stop worrying about the current situation. So,
right.
And then once it all happens, it's easy to say whilst they're going through it. But my experience is once it's all done and dusted, most people are like, I don't even know why I cared about that. My life is great now. I've got enough money to do what I want. I'm working. I've got more headspace. I'm happier. If there was money there, so be it. And it's easier to see in hindsight, of course. So I try and sort of coach that mentality. It's like, just don't focus on what you don't know is there, because there might not be anything. And like Jayne said, there probably isn't.
And even if there is, you'll often find it's small sums of money. They might have tried to hide 5 or 10,000 or done something a bit dodgy. Yeah. And the cost of trying to find that is not cost proportionate. And also it doesn't really change much in reality when you're looking at the overall picture and you're trying to meet people's needs. Sometimes it can send you down a bit of a rabbit hole when you're looking for something at the gold at the end of the rainbow, and you just never find it.
And it's just focusing on the wrong thing. It's focusing on something, and I totally understand, Claire, you probably understand the sort of psychology behind this, but it's focusing, and I guess it's something that they know and it's tangible and they understand. There's a pot of money somewhere, but that's not what should be focused on. It's focusing on your life and what you want to do. And if we can make it work and make it great, that's good. And you don't have to worry about what you don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds going to Claire now, I suppose. It sounds like these kind of difficulties push it more into that emotional space, like you were saying in your previous answer about people not focusing on the process because they're getting too tied up in the emotions of it all. So how do you try and keep everything as friendly as possible if this kind of thing is happening?
So I think just going back a step, the sort of suspicion that your ex-partner is trying to hide financial assets is sometimes just a symptom of the breakdown in trust in the relationship. And I agree with Naomi. I would do work with my clients around asking questions to get clarity around how much would it cost to actually investigate this? What would I have to do? How long would it take? And quite often, usually the client will realise by themselves, and that's what I always want to happen, the client to realise for themselves that it's not cost effective. However, there is something around you can't negotiate from a position of not knowing the facts. And I do come across quite often, I'm working with somebody whose partner is not wanting to disclose everything. And that causes issues and breakdown in trust as well. And I often talk with clients around the word amicable being thrown around as a bit of a threat. So clients will receive a message from their ex-partner saying, you wanted to be amicable, now you've involved solicitors, and that's not really the way to go amicable. And I always say to people, this is a process. And being amicable doesn't mean that you abandon the process. It means that you both show up and do the process properly. It doesn't mean being compliant. It doesn't necessarily mean falling over and agreeing to something without getting the clarity that you need. And there's a process here to follow. So I've gone slightly off track from your question, but amicable doesn't necessarily mean that you just accept what your partner is saying. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to get information. It's okay to ask for clarity on the process moving forward and what you need to know.
Okay. Obviously, one thing that's changed in the last year is the introduction of no-fault divorce, and obviously not having to list someone as being at fault for the divorce. How has this is a question to all of you, I guess. How do you see that this has changed the divorce journey already, or how do you see it happening in the future if it's not happening already?
So I'll jump in there first. So as it's changed in April, we've done a few now, and I have seen that it has changed things already. I mean, already it just allows you to get to the nub of sorting out the practical arrangements. You're sorting out the children arrangements. You're sorting out the finances without having to spend quite a significant amount of time drafting a divorce petition based on behaviour or discussing what the grounds should be. Should it be adultery? What's happened? Why is your relationship broken down? Which is all very valuable work, but not necessarily for a solicitor to do that. That would be more sort of Claire's arena to deal with why the relationship's broken down. You know, solicitors, we're very expensive and we're aware of that, and we want to get, we want to be able to offer the best service we can for as most cost proportionate and reasonable price that we can. And it just allows us to just say, right, okay, if you think your marriage is broken down irretrievably, we just have to tick that box and your divorce petition can go off. The only downside as solicitors we've found at the moment with the new process, and it's only a small one because I'm wholeheartedly behind it and think it was a great change, is where you have got some people that are really kind of amicable, really on it, and they've sorted it all out, and you can sort it all out very reasonably and very quickly. The new process, you have to wait 20 weeks before you can get a decree nisi, which means you can't file any consent orders for 5 months. Which is a little bit of a downside. If you've reached a resolution very quickly, you have to wait before you can kind of finalise that with the court and get any orders that would have mean sales of properties or transfers of lump sums.
And what's their reasoning behind that?
It's kind of an inbuilt cooling off period, because they're now saying you don't have to say a ground, or effectively the public policy would be that it's too easy now, in quotes, to get divorced. So they've built in this cooling off period to say, well, you can say you want to get divorced, but you have to wait this 20 weeks before you can take it to the next step, just in case you change your mind, or just in case it was a kind of flash moment of anger that you've gone in and done it online and done it quickly. So it's kind of an inbuilt 14-day cooling off period that you have online, but much longer.
Okay. And Naomi, I guess the same question. How do you think no-fault divorce is changing things?
I mean, it's not the area that affects what I do with a client, to be honest with you, other than the emotional side of it, that it makes things obviously easier and quicker to move forward with. And anything that takes the obstacles away if there is a bad situation, I guess, is good. But in terms of, I think it's really more the emotional side for Claire and the legal side. For me, I deal with what's happened once it's all been agreed anyway, so I don't get involved with that side of things early on. Okay. I would never be there right at the beginning anyway. It's usually after they've at least spoken to the solicitor and things have started at least to be in motion. But yeah, I mean, I think it's only going to be a good thing if someone wants to get divorced. But yeah, I guess time will tell.
That sounds like Naomi's teed you up there, Claire.
It does, doesn't it? So the big thing, or the big difference that I've noticed in speaking with my clients is that right from the word go, it's keeping the emotional aspects out of the divorce, the legal divorce process. And previously, I've spent lots of time with clients who are worried about how their ex will react to the statement that they're going to make, say unreasonable behaviour, how their ex will respond to that, and will it make them angry, that kind of thing. And that worry has now gone away, which is really good if you are, for example, leaving an abusive relationship. That has been utterly terrifying for some clients that I've worked with in the past. And the other advantage of that, I think, is keeping the emotional aspects out of it right from the start helps us explain to clients that actually the court doesn't really take those emotional aspects into consideration when it's looking at what a fair settlement might look like. And I've had clients in the past who found that really difficult to come to terms with, that, that the court isn't going to punish their ex for having an affair or for their bad behaviour, except in, really terrible circumstances. So that's really helpful. The other thing that has been helpful is the knowledge that your ex-partner can no longer object to the divorce either and force you to defend it, which I think is, again, really important for those clients who were leaving abusive relationships, perhaps where they were worried that their ex might just make it all as difficult as possible by refusing to agree or consent to the divorce.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I guess before I close, is there anything else any of you would like to cover? I can maybe just tee up a question if you had anything you wanted to cover before we finish.
nothing to cover, but I would just say that actually it is I think, as Claire said, with a perfect analogy, it's really helpful to have solicitor, therapist or coach and financial advisor on board as early as possible. The three work really well together, and I think it just really supports the whole divorce journey. We're not supposed to be jack of all trades. Solicitors are not supposed to understand everything about the finances in terms of financial models and how they work, and nor are we able to deal with all the emotional side of it as a coach like Claire would. So I think the fact that there can be these different skill sets that can be brought together to help a client through the whole journey is really important and really special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. The way I see it is it's really important to have a team around you at this time, and your lawyer or your coach or therapist or your financial advisor can't do all of the jobs. So you need the right people at the right time for the right issues. And we can all work really well together to provide you with that supportive cushion as you go through this process, because it's commonly accepted as being the second most traumatic thing you can go through now. So who wouldn't want a team around you at that point in time?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also I think it prevents people asking friends and family, which, as we all know, isn't the best way to go about it, because it's just based on hearsay and it's not factual, and it's just not the right way to go. If you've got professionals, at least you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I've got another lovely analogy for that.
Go on.
So if you imagine that you're going through a divorce and it feels awful and you're kind of at the bottom of a well and it's cold and it's dark and it's wet, what do you want? Do you want somebody to climb down into that well and sit with you and complain with you, and which is what friends sometimes do, and feed your anger or feed your depression? Or would you rather somebody climb down with some tools that is going to help you to climb out of that well and see the sunshine again?
Claire, you're good. I like it.
That's very good.
I think that's we can't beat that. So I think I'm going to just end it on that and say, thanks very much, Jayne, Naomi and Claire, for joining us. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our guests for giving their time up to discuss this. Ed, what was one of your main takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, there was a lot in there, obviously, but I think probably the one that stood out for me was them talking about the fact that using, you don't want this to get acrimonious, or I thought you wanted this to be simple, as almost like a way to shut up the other side, and I hadn't thought of it that way. But overall, really, really interesting. Indeed.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to more, you can visit our, I'd say, rather large back catalogue now at rwkgoodman.com/legal-thinking. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, do give us a 5-star review. That helps other people find us and does all kind of algorithmic stuff, which is highly beneficial. So we'd really appreciate it if you do that. And until next week, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks for listening.